Dun, 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 dun,
Hello,
dun.
everyone, and welcome to the Spooky Magma Rages episode 53. There is big news going down in Hearthstone this week, and Pandemonia is here to join me to discuss all of the goings on in the Witchwood, which is going to be the new Hearthstone expansion. How excited are you, Pandemonia?
I'm always excited for new cards. I'm just sad that, like, what always makes me sad is when they initially announce it and then they tell you spoilers are only going to start in like 3 weeks' time. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, like,
Yeah.
why? Why you do this?
I think it's 2 weeks. It's like 20.
It's like 2.5, 3 weeks, yeah. But I'm saying it's
No,
quite a
yeah,
while
but
away,
anyway. Yeah, so I mean that's bad news out the way. The cards that we're going to be showing you today are the only cards we're going to be getting for a while. But we've got a lot of information, about the expansion as a whole. A lot of the speculation, Cenarian Circle, Emerald Dream, all of that turned out to be wrong. And I think the only real hint that they gave that makes sense in the context now is that Latin American one that we spoke about, where they venturing through the forest or through the woods. And I mean, it seems like this is going to be a very Hearthstone-y themed expansion, if you know what I mean. They're taking very much their own twist rather than just copying something straight out of the Warcraft lore.
yeah.
As far as I know, the area that this takes place in, and what they're talking about is the Witchwood, isn't even necessarily called the Witchwood. It's called something else, and some of the local people call it the Witchwood. Anyway, the expansion is the Witchwood, um, and we don't know too much about the expansion. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch of new mechanics, and it's going to be releasing mid-April. But other than that, I mean, we the theme is just seemingly centered around this kind of wood, which is has a witch in it, who, as the name might give away. But I mean, the theme they went with for the reveal video, which was very cringy but still good to watch, was the kind of Blair Witch Project vibes. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, I definitely suggest you go watch that if you want. I at least thought the song was pretty good. We don't have to get a Ben Brode rap, so that's a good start.
But I wanted to. I like Ben Bird's rap.
I mean,
I
maybe
wanted
maybe he'll do one just for you, but you know,
or for Reddit.
for Reddit, yeah. But we don't have to get one at least. Ben Brode can focus on tournament, in-game tournaments.
Hashtag not tournament mode.
Yeah. Okay, so as we said, the expansion releases mid-April. There are some new keywords. We'll get to these when we go over the cards that have involved them. Um, the one really good piece of news that kind of came as a footnote to this is that the pre-order is now going to give you 70 packs instead of just 50. So more packs for your buck. Um, which I think is a pretty good incentive. I think it's definitely encourage more people to buy the pre-order first of all, and then probably more people to even buy more packs after that. Because you're like, once you've had 70, you're like, I could do with another 40, another
Yeah,
60.
exactly.
Yeah,
Oh, and I saved, so but I can spend that
exactly,
money.
exactly.
I didn't buy those 20 packs, so the money I can buy an extra 20 packs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the marketing behind it, a lot of it,
Yeah.
right? The psychology.
I mean, ultimately, I think Blizzard are largely doing it because of the outcry of the cost of the game recently, and I think that's largely to do with it. There was um, some other information about the monster hunt mode that we'll get to a bit later. And there's also, 135 cards, which is pretty much what we expect now. Every class is going to be getting two legendaries. It doesn't seem like there's going to be like a specific legendary cycle that we know of yet. Not like not like the Death Knights or the weapons. So nothing like that we know of. We do know that there's going to be a new hero card though, and that's going to be Hagatha, which is a shaman hero card. But we know nothing else about it. Hagatha is kind of the witch of the Witch of the Woods, or the witch of the Witchwood. Um, so they joked about, oh, this card's OP, but it's gonna be interesting to see. It's quite a different dynamic, only giving one class, a hero card. Do you like this kind of idea?
I've, to be very honest, as much as like cycles are sometimes nice, it is actually nice to shake it up with sort of as much as I'm OCD and like
Mm-hmm.
symmetry. Shaking it up with asymmetry is always good,
Mm.
but in terms of you've always got to be careful, that you don't shake it up to the point of breaking the game, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of, when you give every class a quest or everyone, the whole idea is that, oh, everyone's, it's fair is fair, in a way,
Yeah,
even though
it's not really
it's not
though.
really, because some quests are garbage, some are great.
Yeah,
The same with the Death Knights.
yeah. I mean, the majority of quests were garbage. Really, it was just pretty much warrior and rogue that were good,
Yeah.
and mage, and pretty much none of the other quests really saw any play. I mean, druid's seen a bit of play more recently, but yeah. I mean, when it comes to Death Knights, those were also, still very different. I mean, before Raza nerf, the Shadow Reaper Anduin was clearly the one that benefited the most, let's say. Now Gul'dan's sitting at probably the top of the throne of the
They
Death Knights.
actually,
So
most of them actually see play. I was just thinking of it.
yes,
Actually,
the
most of
Death
them
Knights,
actually
the
see
Death
play
Knights
now.
mostly saw play, but they're still not equal in terms of power
Yeah, they're
level,
not equal
right?
power level. No, they're definitely
But
not.
the Death Knight cards are, or the hero cards in general, are so important because they give you a different way to play the game. Like you can build a whole different deck strategy based around them. They allow you to have these kind of alternate win condition like value games. Like if we look at Deathstalker Rexar, that's the one that really stands out to me as allowing you to change the way you play Hunter, because you can play the more like slower value based Hunter. It gives you a different game plan. A lot of the times, what we saw at HCT Toronto in particular, which is the HCT event that happened over the weekend, what we saw at that event in particular was a lot of um, players having to make decisions whether they were going to go down the Deathstalker Rexar game plan to win a game or to go the more aggressive game plan. And the hero cards really allow that kind of
Yeah.
game plan. I mean, the Gul'dan is a little bit more straightforward in how it's used, and it's pretty much just part of the game plan at this point. Um, but for some of the hero cards, they really do kind of do that. I mean, Shadow Reaper Anduin did that as well, right? A totally different
Yeah.
approach to priest in a way.
So we'll see. I mean, if Hagatha, I mean, obviously the joke slash meme in the video, spoiler alert, is they don't actually show you the full card, but they're like, oh my goodness, it's so OP. How could we have printed this card? And then it kind of cuts with the card where you see half the card.
Yeah, yeah. My question is, do you think they're gonna show it as like the first card on the new reveal stream when they start the main reveals, or do you think they're gonna like
Ooh,
still
that's such a
try and
tough one.
build towards it? Because it's like it's such a unique legendary in the sense that it's a hero card that no other like class is getting a hero card, and because of the asymmetry, it's kind of more unique. And obviously, it's like the main.
Yeah.
It's like having Arthas or the Lich King as like a hero card, right? It's like the main antagonist of the
Yeah.
expansion.
So it'll be very interesting actually, like, because they could kind of it's a case of you start off with a big bang, right?
Mm.
Or it could be the mentality of end with it just before, keep people hyped up, because keep people wondering when is it going to be released, are they
Yeah.
going to spoil it tomorrow or the day after, so I don't know, they like both are equally viable sort of options in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it would either be the final reveal stream that they do or the first one, and I think it's more
Yeah.
likely to be the first one. Blizzard generally tend to show what they think are the big exciting cards, whether those are necessarily that good or not. And I mean, we have to take the it was is OP thing with a pinch of salt. I'm not necessarily expecting the card to actually be any good necessarily. It just the only
Yeah.
my only expectation for it is basically just based on the fact that the hero cards are generally turned out quite well. So overall, yeah, I think it's probably going to come on that first big reveal stream, but they might even hold it for the end of that reveal stream. That might be how they're going to kind of build a little bit of anticipation for it. Um,
Yeah. Or well, what they'll probably do is what they're known to do is they'll play a game where the deck is built around whatever the Death Knight is, because that usually fits
yeah.
with what they've done, right?
Yes.
They have a
Yes. Yes.
stream with some celebrity, with some personality, and it consists of them building a really badly made deck by Blizzard to try and force an archetype in a way.
Yeah. 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 Well, we can definitely expect to see that. So before we get to the 6 cards that were revealed, there's some other interesting things that have in the patch notes that kind of went under the radar a bit. First of all, the arena changes we spoke about previously, those are now live. So if you haven't been playing Arena, you can go into the arena now. You'll see the new cards, the ones that they revealed at BlizzCon that we spoke about, and you'll also be able to, have the drafting system totally changed now that it's, drafting by rarity, or sorry, drafting by power level rather than drafting by rarity. In terms of how they offer you the cards. So I personally haven't had a chance to go and actually play the arena since, and I don't think you have as well. But just a quick public service announcement to get that out of the way. If you have, if you don't normally play arena but you're waiting for it, well, wait no longer. You can jump right in and take part in the new arena system and see the new cards. I really should actually go play some arena, partly just because of the new cards, right?
You want to play
That'll be
conceal plus cycle, that's why, right?
Smoke bomb.
like,
Yeah.
let's not lie. The only reason you would want to play arena is you saw conceal and cycle, and you were like, yes, please.
Yeah, but how often are they gonna offer me gadgets and auctioneer? That's the question. Yeah. Okay. And yeah. So I mean, that's the other major change that happened. The pre-order is also live. And as we mentioned, that's going to be 70 packs now. So I mean, I'll definitely be doing that. And once again, the cheapest way to do that is kind of through Amazon coins, which unfortunately, we're not even sponsored by Amazon, so we can't give you an Amazon coin code. But that's usually the cheapest way to do it, and I mean, I know that's the way Patamonia and I do it. So, yeah. You can ask us on Twitter if you want some more information about that in particular. That's probably the easiest way. Don't really want to cover that in this episode. So, moving on to the 6 cards, we can talk about them starting with the legendaries that they revealed. Some neutral legendaries. First, we have Azalina Soul Thief. This is a 7 mana 3/3, so it's a good start. That was sarcasm. 7 mana 3/3 Battle Cry. Replace your hand with a copy of your opponent's. So a little bit like Divine Favor-esque. That's kind of what I've seen people compare it to. The big difference being that if you were holding any like particular value cards in your hand, maybe a Sunkeeper Tarium, a common situation we would see in Paladin, then you are going to lose that and just get cards from your opponent. So obviously, the plus side, you could draw a bunch of cards essentially without having to fatigue yourself, which can be relevant. The downside, you're getting cards that may not really synergize with your deck. Hopefully, they'll at least synergize with with each other. And the super downside, you're paying 7 mana for a 3/3.
Yeah, which I hear is not very good.
No.
So, like you say, with regards to draw cards, is like if you play this at the right time, there is the chance that you can rip absolutely ridiculous things like Nzop or like a specific, because does it replace your? Oh, you just get a copy, so it doesn't actually steal it. I initially thought
No.
it stole it.
No. Yeah.
Because then I'll be like, that actually might be pretty good, right?
Yeah.
It just gives you the info, basically, as well, of what's in their hand.
Yeah. So you get a full copy of their hand. But yeah, you don't actually get any.
Oh, for some reason I misread it. I thought it's like,
Yeah, my first reading
stole.
was that like you swapped hands or something, and then yeah. So I did realize, after actually looking at it, I think this is actually a good time to Well, okay. First of all, before we kind of say what we think of the card overall, I think it's actually a good time to interject with our Magma Rages tip for the week. This is, I think, a card that very much demonstrates a lot of the factors that are important in what's going to be our tip for the week, which is how you evaluate cards before they actually come out. So, Panamonia, how do we start going about determining whether Azalina Soul Thief is actually good or not?
So the simplest way back to bare bones, and this comes from many card games with a mana system, is what is simply known as the vanilla test. And simply what the vanilla test says is if a minion has no words on it, as in it's a vanilla minion. So examples from the basic set are River Crocolisk, or Chilwyn Yeti, Boulderfist Ogre. The vanilla test says what you should do is add the attack and the attack and health, and divide by 2. and that number should be above the mana cost. So, example, Chilwell Yeti, it's a 4/5 for 4 mana. You add 4 to 5, gives you 9, divided by 2, gives you 4.5, which is higher than 4. So, what we generally say is we refer to that as being above curve or overstated, if you will.
Yeah.
And then, but obviously, Hearthstone is not just about vanilla minions.
Yeah.
As there's
And
death rattles, taunt, there's all sorts of different mechanics.
I think the other important thing to look at is how the stats are distributed as well.
Yes.
So, in Hearthstone, the way it works, health is generally a little bit better than having more attacks. So a 4/5 is often better than a 5/4 in terms of how they manage to trade with minions below their mana cost in particular. And, the extreme example of that is, of course, everyone's favorite card, Magma Ranger. There we go.
Yeah, because stats-wise, I mean, it is 3 mana for 5/1.
Yep.
Which, like vanilla test-wise, it's actually very meh because it's gives you a value of 3.
It's on curve. It's equivalent to a 3 mana 3/3 when you compare it to a pure vanilla test, right?
But the problem is that it trades down because of the 1 health. So it dies to most hero powers, it dies to most 1 cost, even 0 cost minions.
Yeah. Or 0 cost spells.
Yeah.
And Moonfire.
So that's obviously the basis of which when anyone refers to vanilla test, that's what we talk about. Obviously, what makes this whole approach obviously a lot more complicated is when, like I say, the minions have battle cry or death rattle. So the first simple example of like battle cries is where it draws a card, whether it's battle cry or death rattle. So examples: novice engineer and loot hoarder.
Yeah.
Those are the sort of 2 simple examples, and usually different people have their own systems, but the general approach is that drawing a card is worth about 1.5 mana.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at a card like Arcane Intellect, because obviously, how much mana something's worth also depends on the card game itself. So if we look at Hearthstone, obviously, and we're looking at Arcane Intellect, that's 3 mana to draw 2 cards. So you can say that most of the time, if you look at Hearthstone, it's costing you at least 1.5 mana to draw a card. I mean, you look at Novice Engineer, obviously understated as a 1/1 for 2, but you can draw the card. You're kind of getting 2/2
the 3 stats with it, right?
Yeah.
Well, not the 3.
The
3 stats points.
Yeah.
So it works out to about 5 stat points for 2 mana, which is pretty good. That's kind of it's decent.
I mean, okay, you're overpaying for a 1/1 by roughly 1 mana, right?
Yes.
But a 1 mana 1/1 is also not really like on curve for Hearthstone. So it's a little bit different there, like Loot Hoarder is probably more equivalent to what a 1 mana 1/1 would be without the Death Rattle to draw a card, but in that case the Death Rattle is a delayed effect, so you also weigh Battle Cries and Death Rattles a little bit differently in terms of the delayed effect versus the immediate effect, right, of Novice Engineer versus like Loot Hoarder.
And then obviously if they have like taunt or charge, usually then their stats are significantly weaker.
Yep.
So case in point, you take Wolf Rider. Wolf Rider is obviously a simple charge, or you look at a simple taunt minion like
Sentient Shield Master.
Sentient Shield Master. So there we go. It's a 4 mana 3/5 taunt instead of vanilla 4 mana 4/5.
Yeah.
And whereas Wolf Rider is a 3 mana 3/1. Whereas you get easily 3 mana 3/4s. If not better. So those are the basic. What obviously gets very more complicated is trying to allocate values to unique effects. And so this obviously is where it ties into, evaluating actually quite a few of the cards that have been revealed. It's because, like we say, draw a card, gain armor. Those are all things you can roughly approximate.
Based on existing effects and how much you're willing to pay for them. But an effect like Azalina's here, where you're replacing your hand with a copy of your opponent's, that's pretty difficult, right? You can kind of, we compared it to Divine Favor, and you can most likely equivalate, you can most likely, look at it as equivalent to drawing cards until your hand size is equal to your opponent, but it's slightly
Yeah.
different because those cards are not necessarily cards that you put in your deck. They're not cards that necessarily synergize with your game plan. You could,
And it replaces any card you had in your hand.
yes, and that
That's
as well.
sort of quite a
So
difference as well.
I mean, it's like playing Divine Favor with no cards in hand, right? That's the
Yeah.
the most similar kind of scenario as you look at
So
Azalina.
you essentially pay. I mean, so if we, backtrack a bit here, the fact that it's a 3/3, you're paying essentially what 4 to 4.5 mana
Yeah.
for this effect. And so what you've got to ask yourself then is, for it to be worthwhile, 4.5 mana. I mean, okay, let's okay, 4.5 mana. It's 50% more than Arcane Intellect.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So basically, you need so baseline for it to sort of say it needs to get you 3 cards, right?
Yeah.
For it to be decent. But I mean, for it to be like kind of okay. But ideally, you probably want it to be more than that because you're spending your 7 mana on a 3/3.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just the stats. The fact is the effect isn't immediate. Like, even though the effect happens immediately, it doesn't impact the board. You've still just spent 7 mana to play a 3/3. So that's kind of obviously where you've got to weigh out of are the cards really worthwhile? I mean, this could be a tech card. I think if the meta becomes very heavy control, right?
Yeah.
This could be
Like
potentially a tech card.
the card, yeah. I mean, so we've kind of covered the main key bases, right? When is evaluating a card, you want to look at um, the value you're getting from it based on its stat line and the effect that it has. So in this case, an effect that's similar to drawing cards. Um, and I think the one other major thing is the impact that it has on the board, right? So
Yes.
very often you might overpay for a minion for the impact it has on the board. If we look at something like Vilespine Slayer, which kills a minion and gives you a 3/4, but 5 mana for a 3/4 is clearly overpaying in terms of the value there. But you kind of need to equate that effect of killing a minion to, let's say, I don't know, an assassinate almost. I
Yep.
mean,
And
that's
then
where
you
you
just go
realize how
past its
much you're.
value, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can compare that to kind of value as well, but very often, that kind of tempo is um, very important. The actual like effect that it has on the board, because even sometimes you look at a card like Gruul or I'm trying to think of a card like a big card that has lots of value but not much tempo, like Ysera, right? Ysera has massive value, giving you extra cards. The stats are okay, they're not amazing. It's 16 stats for 9 mana, so a little bit under
But the
standard,
value,
but the
the
value
cards
that
you
you
get.
get, yeah, the value of the cards you get is really powerful. I mean, you can get a 4 mana 7/6, which is clearly overstated,
Yeah.
as well as, the powerful cards like Dream, Nightmare, Ysera Awakens,
And
etc. But Ysera has a pretty low kind of effect on the board immediately, and which is why it's often, in and out of decks. It's not really a staple. It doesn't have that kind of instant board impact like something like Ragnaros used to have
yes,
before it
good
rotated
old
out.
rag.
Yeah.
So yeah, so as the leader does like that. I just had this great idea though. The meme train is going to be if you play people play as a leaner against each other, right?
Oh boy, because you get an Azalina back in your hand.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know how often this will actually happen, but
Well, after the first person. Oh wait, no, it just continues
if you play
forever, right?
Azalina, you get the Azalina, you get an infinite
Yeah.
Azalina chain.
Yeah. Basically.
For the memes, but yeah,
Well, as long as you're playing other cards from your hand as well, it's not
yeah.
infinite in a way, if you know what I mean.
Yo, you keep just getting Azalina though. You might
Yeah, the
not get the other.
Azalinas can
Yeah,
be infinite, yeah. But anyway.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So it's tough to evaluate. It's probably, if anything, it will be a fringe tech card. I don't think it's going to be the core of any decks.
Yeah.
That's my initial impression, and I don't think there's a whole lot that they can release to make it like the core of a deck.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't believe. I would be amazed if we all of a sudden see a deck completely revolving around this strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gives something that is so far been kind of unique to Paladin. It gives a similar kind of effect to other classes, and that's also why it has to be overcosted for that effect,
Yeah,
because that's kind of a class identity of paladins, that it has something like divine favor, and you don't necessarily want to give that to every single other class in the game, and that's kind of
Mm.
why they also have to be kind of cautious with these kind of effects. So uh, going back to Azalina itself, obviously, we're not going to be doing any kind of rating system. We kind of will reserve that for once we know a lot more about their cards. But right now, we're basically just looking at it as mostly a tech card rather than anything else at this stage.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. We have Baku the Moon Eater. This is a 9 mana 7/8 beast. It's a legendary and it reads start of game. If your deck has only odd cost cards, upgrade your hero power. So, are you ready to tank up again?
Yes and no. So like obviously as soon as I announced, "Ooh, upgrade hero power," my first thought was, Justicar, how I have missed thee. Uh, but then obviously the I mean you could call it the drawback or deck building limitation is your deck can only have odd cost cards.
Yep.
So for the effect, so straight off the bat, you're never going to play this in a deck with even because a 9 mana 7/8 that does nothing is not good, right?
Yeah.
It's severely understated.
Yeah.
So you only ever so I mean let's start with it might be obvious that you only ever playing this guy or this thing. What is it? A beast. This
Beast.
beast. If you only play an odd cost card in your deck, and you know I'm obviously always cautious about these things because much like with cards like Killer Seth and Tal'Daram, initially you're like, no, decks can't, we can't evolve, but then eventually decks evolve to own, to play around the limitation, and they turned out to be pretty good. I
Yep.
mean, you look at, the best pacing point was probably Tempo Rogue. I mean, I will be very honest. I was one of those people who was like, uh, there's no ways a rogue is cutting Eviscerate and Sap.
Yeah.
Like that was honestly and then it turned out cutting it was for Killer Seth was pretty good.
Yep.
Obviously, there was a lot of other support for it. So this is similar. This Baku and one of the other cards we're going to cover in a bit
Yep.
have these sort of this it either makes an entire archetype by itself
Yeah.
or it's unplayable, right? There's no middle way.
Yeah. I mean, it's an effect we first saw with something like Reno.
Yeah,
That was
Reno.
really the very first instance of this kind of effect.
Yeah, Reno, and then obviously all the like Kazakus and all those sort of cards.
Yeah.
So I mean, the effect is very powerful. I mean, it will basically, I think, the only decks that will consider playing it will probably be the same decks that considered that played Justicar True Heart.
Yeah.
I mean, and then obviously each of those decks you've got to go, each of those classes you've got to go case by case and go, you know, how important are my uncosted cards? And then you've got to literally go through like each mana cost and go, okay, obviously the core cards are probably going to be the one cost. I mean, the 2 and 4 cost obviously are because it's the early game.
Yeah. I think the one sorry, the one very important thing to note as well that makes this quite different to Justicar. So first of all, by upgrade hero power, they do just mean in the same way Justicar did. So for example, with Warrior, we're talking about tank up. Your hero power becomes gain 4 armor instead of gain 2. Hunter, it's deal 3 damage with steady shot instead of 2. Mage, it's deal 2 damage with the fire blast instead of 2, instead of 1. So if you weren't around in the TGT times and didn't see Justicar, you can look up those effects. It's basically all those effects. So
And only changes your starting hero power though. That's
yes,
a sort of that's important to note. So it doesn't
yes,
upgrade Death Knight powers or Jiraxis powers. That's just an important thing. If you weren't to
yes,
like you say, if you weren't around at that time.
yeah. That is an important thing to note. So any effect that changes your hero power otherwise will not be affected by Baku.
Yeah,
And the one other thing that's very important to note is, they've gone with this kind of uh, Keleseth based deck building restriction, which is about cost of cards.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, print Prince based, with the Prince rotation. But the important thing they've done here is they've put start of the game on the card, right? So first of
Yeah.
all, this is the first time we're seeing a card since Prince Malchazar that's kind of been based on at the start of your game. But
Yeah.
Prince Malchazar was like an unconditional start of your game. This is the first conditional, does a check at the start of your game, right? So
Yeah.
what this means is you can't put cards that would break the rule otherwise, and then hope to draw them before you play the card, like was sometimes done with Reno in particular. There was some, Reno freeze mage lists that played like 7 duplicate cards, and you just hope to draw them before you played Reno, because very often they were cycle cards themselves. So first of all, you can't do that with Baku. That's quite important to note. And second
Yep.
of all, Baku helps reduce the um, randomness element and the inconsistency of something like Keleseth. One of the biggest complaints about Prince Keleseth has always been that in the tempo mirrors, in particular, it became a case of whoever drew Keleseth first would often just win, right? And
Yeah.
cards like Baku, changing the design of those deck building limitations to have a start of the game effect. Really is a good improvement, I think. But you can see what it's kind of forced them to do. Because they've given them the consistency, they've had to kind of give up some of the stats. So Keleseth, we got a 2 mana 2/2, but Baku,
Yeah.
we're getting a 9 mana 7/8. And basically, this is a card you just never want to draw. You always want it to be your 30th card, which is the polar opposite of Keleseth, for example.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, the deck building restriction is obviously much more massive with Baku. I think partly because they were maybe a little scared after the princes. But I think they
Yeah.
probably designed this quite a while ago, to be honest, before they even necessarily saw the princes. So
But I mean, they wanted to be also, I think they were a bit apprehensive. They didn't want to make it too cheap, right? And
yeah,
like actually a good minion.
yeah. And the other thing that's important to note about the start of the game thing is that unlike with Justicar, where in certain classes you wouldn't want to play Justicar because by the time you got to play Justicar, the upgraded hero power wasn't necessarily worth it. The start of the game one, it can sometimes be worth it, right? Because let's say you're getting steady shot from turn one. That's one of the kind of memes or ideas I've seen thrown around a lot about Baku as kind of Baku face hunter.
Yeah.
You just hope never to draw Baku, and you just get to deal 3 damage from the start of the game with your hero
Yeah.
power. And I
I mean,
mean, that's
that's a thing.
a game plan. I'm not sure it's a very consistent game plan. And I mean, the big problem with those kind of decks is when you're cutting your even cost cards, you're making it very difficult to fill out your mana curve, which is one of the important things to do
Yeah,
as
that's obviously
a
a worry.
as like a hunter or something. And the only time you get to fill out your mana curve with your hero power is when you're on an odd cost turn anyway. So like turn 5, you can play a 3 drop in hero power, you know, or maybe turn 3 you can play a 1 drop in hero power. But that's not really going to help you that much. It's only really turn 2 that is
But
filled by
yeah.
your hero power. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you know, you're not getting any tempo, not getting any board presence, which means I don't think a face plan is necessarily going to be good.
Yeah, it's and I mean my sort of the thing is like obviously because my first thought was with a Justicar in control in control decks. My first thought was, but wait, I can't play Doomsayer then, right?
Sure. And you can't play
So
Unidentified Shield, you can't play Bring It On. Like when I was looking at the Control Warrior cards that you can't play, it's basically all the armor cards, largely.
yeah,
Shield Block's probably the only one of the ones that survives. A lot of the removal is still okay, like Shield Slam, Brawl.
you lose
Um,
execute though in that case as
yeah, you
well.
lose Execute, but you like what Reckless Flurry, you still have that available to you. So like, I think it's a little bit difficult to say Baku will not be playable because first of all we need to see all the new cards, right? Maybe
Yep.
there's some alternates. Maybe there's a 3 mana Execute, right? Maybe a 3 mana Execute makes Baku good, even though 3 mana Execute's something you would never play in or most other decks unless you just
Yeah, I
wanted
mean we'll have to
more
see.
Executes.
So like I say, it's either going to be exceptionally good or exceptionally terrible. Like there's no middle ground, right?
Yeah, I think it'll be a core factor in certain decks, and the rest won't want to play it. I would
Yeah,
rather say that than exceptionally good or exceptionally terrible. Because if we look at like Keleseth now, it's core in certain decks, but
yeah,
since the patches nerf, it really is not exceptional anymore. Its win rates are not that high, and frankly, there's not even that many decks playing Keleseth, and like Zoo, for instance, is probably the biggest example of this, where they've largely dropped Keleseth and even the
Yeah.
Spyfall Priest as well because of the lack of patches charging. So
Yep.
yeah, Baku, I really like the design though. I must say, I like the fact that they've changed it to start of the game for this deck building constraint, to reduce
Yeah.
the kind of RNG of like the having to draw Keleseth kind of thing. So I really like that. That they're looking at the game and making these kind of improvements to concepts they've already kind of worked on before.
Yeah,
Um,
and also just important. So, like you mentioned it, but just in case it isn't obvious. So, for example, it doesn't apply to this one. It applies to the evens one that you can't even run quests.
uh,
Like so, like the not
yeah,
this
yeah,
one,
yeah,
the
yeah.
other one. Yeah, the fact that you can't actually run the quests in them, even though you start your opening hand, it will start in your deck, so therefore it doesn't count.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, quests don't work in that kind of case where you might hope that they would. Um, yeah. Okay. So moving on to that next card that you were mentioning, we have Glen Greymane. So do you want to tell
You
us
mean
what? Wait, oh,
even man?
Gen Greymane. Sorry.
I'm going
Gen
to refer to him as like
Greymane.
even legendary and odd legendary.
Oh
Like,
boy. Like we call it Prince 2, Prince 4, and Prince 3.
exactly, it's going to be even man.
Well, I mean the yeah, okay. Gen Greymane is apparently like the arch rival to Sylvanas. Like
Oh, okay.
Sylvanas killed his son or something, or the other way around. I don't know my Warcraft lore that very well, or that well, but yeah. So you can call him anti-Sylvanas if you want, but that doesn't really make any sense as to what he actually does. Do you want to tell us what Gen Greymane actually does?
So he's the kind of guy that if your deck has only even cost cards, your hero power costs one. So it's Maiden of the Lake basically.
Yeah, and like Main Lake, he costs 6 mana and he's a 6/5 legendary. Well, I mean, Main Lake wasn't legendary, but he is
No, Maiden of the Lake
legendary.
costs 4 mana though, huh?
Oh,
It was
right.
4 mana for a
Oh, yeah,
2/6.
it was 2/6. I knew there was a 6 in there somewhere. So,
Yeah.
Gen Greymane, obviously better statted here, a 6 mana, 6/5. But, I mean, the effect, hero power costing 1, that's probably nowhere near. And one other important thing to note, it is starting hero power costs 1. So, they've kind of protected themselves against future Death Knight nonsense. Like we saw with Shadow Reaper, Anduin, and Raza, right?
Yeah, but so so when I had like before I was thinking too carefully, I had this amazing idea. I was like, it'd be really great if you combine the two because if you have your hero power that costs one and it's upgraded, how amazing would that be? It would be like the dungeon runs, and then it hit me, and then it hit me. That's probably not gonna work. So guys, don't try that.
Yeah, don't try that at home. You will get neither effect because you know you'd have to have no cards in your deck.
You know
And
what'd be the super troll of the card though? Would be if Blizzard made the Baku cost an even number.
yeah, but then it just wouldn't work
That's
ever.
what I'm saying. But like imagine how much of a troll would that be though?
That wouldn't be a troll. It would just be bad design. I don't get it. I know what you're saying, but anyway.
Yeah.
So if we look at Gen Greymane through our new card evaluation lens, we've been teaching people. This one's obviously a lot better on its vanilla test. Only a little bit off. -1 on the health. The one caveat I'd like to add to the vanilla test is in Hearthstone, generally you want plus a half. Like if we look at Yeti as kind of what we consider acceptable stats, which is plus a
Yeah.
half, and Gen Greymane is minus a half here. So obviously a little bit
No, it's
bad
actually
in
more than
terms of
minus.
vanilla.
Is it minus
No,
a
it's minus a
half?
half. It's
Oh, it's
11.
minus. Yeah, it's minus half.
No, no, no. Yeah, it's 11. Yeah, and it's 5.5. Yeah, by that vanilla test. So not so great on the vanilla test, and the effect. I mean, do you think the effect's really worth making up for the vanilla test? Is there any decks you think that the hero power costing 1 will actually be worth it?
Uh, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, we kind of saw just sort of a taste as soon as Raza was nerfed to costing one. The deck completely disappeared.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I mean,
obviously that's
Razo's
one
obviously
class.
limited, yeah.
But I mean, if we kind of just, I mean, if we just quickly go through, like, in your head, no, does Druid 1 mana hero power? Probably not.
And
Hunter maybe.
starting hero power. So ideally,
Yeah,
this needs to be a class you're not looking to play your Death Knight in. That is a somewhat important note.
yeah. I mean, Warlock, it's not be bad. I mean, it's like you kind of think which ones would be
Well, I
okay.
mean, Warlock, most of the Warlocks that want to tap, like, it would only really ever be Zoo, right? That would want the 1 mana hero power, so it could do more. And if you have a 1 mana hero power in your Zoo, you can't run any 1 drops? That seems pretty bad.
Yeah, and that's obviously so immediately aggro decks probably don't want it because it's weird. It's a weird sort of mechanic. It's like aggressive decks probably want their hero power cheaper.
Yeah, so I mean, like one of the things you might look at is Face Hunter once again. Like the nice
See,
part about the hero power being cheaper in okay, the nice part about the hero power being 1 mana is that the 1 mana hero power you can fit in every turn. You would have an odd number of mana. So on turn 3, for instance, you can play the hero power and play a 2 drop. On turn 4, you could play a 4 drop. On turn 5, you could hero power and 4 drop again. So you can still kind of curve out a lot smoother than you would with the Baku. So
yeah,
that is one other important thing to notice. But obviously, you do not have an upgraded hero power. It's just cheaper. And a cheaper hero
yeah.
power hasn't really worked out very well for any classes, bar the our Razakis Priest
And then
Overlord
because there was a
decks.
Kadara Drake shenanigans for a while, right?
Yeah, but I mean,
But I mean that was very limited.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
So
I'm not.
again, Greymane, not super impressed, but once again, very much like the last card, at least the start of the game kind of idea is something I like. But
Yeah, we'll have
I,
to see, right?
yeah, it's gonna very much be a wait and see. It's gonna be a deck building challenge that at this point having
Guys,
to figure out all the things going out with rotation and all the new having to wait for to see what all the new things coming in. It's very difficult to say on these 2 cards in particular.
yeah, like I can really guys like Kalenta and Doug already are going to be trying to build this deck on day one. I can tell you now.
Possibly, possibly. Okay, next we have Phantom Militia. So this is a card that does have one of the new mechanics. It has Echo. It's a 3 mana 2/4 with Echo and Taunt. Echo is basically a mechanic which allows you to play the card as many times as you want in a single turn. So we've seen this before with Unstable Evolution, where you can keep playing Unstable Evolution until you end of your turn, and then it goes away from your hand. So very much like that, Phantom Militia, if you're playing it on turn 3, you'll play one Phantom Militia, and then you won't be able to play any more. The card will be removed from your hand. And if it's on turn 6, or when you have 6 mana at least, you can play Phantom Militia and then another Phantom Militia, and then when you end your turn, you'll have no more Phantom Militias in your hand. And if it's on turn 9, you can play 3, then you'll have no more in your hand. So, you get the base idea here. Another important thing to note is any reductions to the card only affect the first copy. So if you somehow reduce, let's say in Wild with Emperor Thaurissan, you reduce Phantom Militia to 2 mana, the subsequent ones will still cost 3 mana. They are
Oh, right. Okay, I
treated
didn't know
as
that.
new cards. And the same is true for any buffs. So any kind of hand buff effects or a Prince Keleseth type effect won't affect the second copies that you play, which is the more relevant factor for standard. Although most of the hand buff mechanics are going away with Mean Streets of Gadgets, and Prince Keleseth is obviously the one other relevant um,
Okay. Yeah,
thing.
that's interesting. I mean, 3 mana 2/4.
Okay, well, first before we discuss this card as a whole, what do you
Yeah.
think of the mechanic Echo?
I don't. I mean, it basically what does is it provides a mana sink and it allows the card to scale well with the game, which I mean is potentially good. I mean, especially in mid to late game, it allows you to, instead of play, in this case, a 3 mana 2/4 taunt, you're going to play 2 or 3. So what does mean is that even though it's obviously overcosted for the effect, you can still get a bit of extra value mid to late game. So it's not the worst top deck, right?
Yep,
I mean, late game, you don't really want to be drawing a 3 mana 2/4 taunt.
yep.
But on turn 10, if you get 3 of them, it's substantially better, right?
Yeah. As a control deck, it can definitely give you more to do. And even as like a mid-range deck, um, Phantom Militia is maybe not the best example for that kind of deck. But if you're getting a card that's well statted for its mana cost and has Echo, then you can play more copies of it in the later game to kind of flood the board. If you're in a top deck scenario as a more,
Yeah.
mid-range or even aggressive deck. So that's going to be pretty interesting. I'm going to be very excited to see Echo on spells. I think Echo on spells can be pretty interesting,
Yeah.
although kind of dangerous, especially in classes like Mage and Priest with their mana
Yeah,
reduction from
reductions. That
Sorcerer's
I can
Apprentice and
really
Radiant
see
Elemental.
there's potentially scary shenanigans. But well, I mean, we'll see what they do, But yeah, like you said, the spell ones are probably the most interesting. Especially, I mean, I can foresee the mage one could be something like add a random card, mage card to your hand, right? They
Yeah,
love making cards like that.
that's
And then,
true.
I mean, if you can basically do it as many times as as many times, it's pretty
Yeah,
decent, right?
yeah. Like if it was 2 mana, add a random card, mage card to your hand, then yeah, the effect would be pretty good with cost reduction because you'd only be paying 1 mana to cycle it. It wouldn't be super OP, but
Yeah.
it would allow you to finish the quest immediately with just two Sorcerer's Apprentices on the board. So that's
Which
something
is
to note.
probably they don't want.
Yeah, that seems like I don't know if that's
Not
even
with.
going to be better for Quest Mage. But anyway, that's so super speculative. We just made up that card. That is not a real card that will exist necessarily. If it is, then I
You
will
heard it
be
first.
shocked. Yeah, frankly. But looking now to Phantom Militia specifically, okay, first of all, I would like to say, yeah, I really like the mechanic Echo, and I'm interested to see what they do with it. It could just be a super boring implementation, though, like we saw with Lifesteal. That never really had any particularly interesting minions with Lifesteal. I mean,
Yeah.
the best Lifesteal minions were like the retconned ones, which was like Wicker Flame Burn Bristle, and like maybe Corpse Taker. Like that was probably
Uh,
well, Corpse Taker was not retconned, but it was probably the
what'd you
best
say? Red?
retconned. So like mm, changed retrospectively.
Oh, red. Okay.
Yeah,
Never heard that
sorry.
term.
So, okay, so going back to Phantom Militia specifically, um, 3 mana 2/4 with Taunt. It's not too bad, right? We see like Hot
It's
Spring
not
Guardian
good
is kind of the
though.
comparable thing, but Hot Spring Guardian has the extra effect, whereas Phantom Militia, the effect is that you get the echo. So when you're playing it on turn 3, it seems pretty bad. On turn 6, getting 2 bodies on the taunt can be useful to kind of make things awkward for your opponents. I think ultimately, the kind of decks where you see this may be working is something like Control Warlock. Some of those decks play um, Stonehill Defender already, and ultimately that's just a card that most of the time just gives you card advantage because it gives you 2 taunts. A lot of the time you don't necessarily pick a Void Lord, which is obviously the synergy card. Rin is the kind of the other one, but the rest of the demons or the rest of the Warlock taunts kind of suck. You don't really want to get a Lakari Fellhound necessarily unless you can get it out with a weapon, and the Control Warlock doesn't usually play the Skull. So
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, that's maybe a deck where we could see it. We could maybe see it in those kind of control decks to kind of have a way to uh, defend in the late game with some higher value, and then kind of force your opponent to flood the board into your AOE. Those kind of game
But right
plans.
now though, you probably still want to play Saturday Chain Gang
Yeah,
almost all the time, right?
yeah. It's, in
Uh,
most kind of tempo-based decks, Saronite Chain Gang is better, but Phantom Militia does give you a little bit more flexibility in the late game in that you can play it three
two
times
or
or
three. Yeah.
I mean 2 times is only marginally better than Saronite Chain Gang. 3 times is obviously better, and Saronite Chain Gang is better with cards like the Evolve effects, for instance,
Yeah.
and it's better with cards like Prince Keleseth because both parts give
So
up.
we'll see. I mean, I like the design. I like the idea, and I'll be interested to see what other effects they put. Obviously, this is quite a sort of a simple, 3 mana 2/4 taunt.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how experimental they're going to go with this effect.
Yeah. Okay, and next we have Militia Commander. So Militia Commander is a warrior minion. This is one of the other new mechanics. Rush. It's a 4 mana 2/5 with Battle Cry, gain +3 attack this turn and rush. Well, okay, sorry, the battle cry doesn't give a rush, but anyway, it has rush. Rush is basically charge, except they can't attack the hero. So what it basically means is they can attack minions the turn they are played.
So Ice Howl is kind of the example, as well as the card charge,
Yeah,
the warrior card
ironically.
charge.
Maybe they should
Ironically,
rename that to rush, actually.
maybe people are already memeing about it.
But the other similar card that's not the same though, and an important difference to note is Charge Devil Saw. Charge Devil Saw reads Battle Cry. It can't attack minions this. It can't attack heroes this turn, which is important for scenarios where you get it out of Carnivorous Cube or something like that, where you manage to get it on the board, like with Katharina, where you manage to get it on the board without actually using the without playing it from your hand, right? Militia
Yeah.
Commander and cards with Rush are not going to be like that. Even if you cube Militia Commander and kill your
Or
cube,
get it from hand or whatever.
yeah, or you get it from any of these other kind of effects, it's not going to be able to attack face that turn as well. So the Rush is a keyword effect and will be on any copies of this card or any instances of this card that come from basically anywhere. So
Although
that's important thing to note.
kind of the comparable card is Storm Knight. The 4-mana 2/5 charge from the basic set.
Yeah,
I mean, stats wise, so the difference there is that it obviously does. The Storm Knight doesn't get the Battlecry buff, but it can attack heroes, right?
Yeah.
And if we look back historically, Storm Knight doesn't really see that, or didn't really see that much play.
Yeah.
But this might. I mean, a 4-mana 5/5 essentially can kill most 4-drops or even higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think Militia Commander is a very powerful card. I mean, it's a 4-mana. It's kind of like a removal spell that leaves behind a 2x, if you think about it like that.
Yeah.
If you're killing a 3/3, it leaves behind a 2/2. If you're killing a 4 attack minion, if you're killing a Chillwind Yeti, for instance, a 4/5, right? You're leaving behind a 2/1, which is kind of like leaving behind, a Disciple of Cthulhu or something like that. So, whilst you might not be leaving behind the most powerful minion, you're getting a very big tempo advantage because you are killing one of their things and still having a minion on the board yourself, and that is really massive. Obviously, the damage you can do is limited, and if you're killing anything with more than 5 attack, you're not going to have anything left. Your Militia Commander is not going to survive, but I think Militia Commander is a very powerful card, and it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize Rush in the future, because with Charge, generally minions have been understated, and it seems with Rush, that isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah, they can kind of, because Rush is obviously not as powerful as Charge, they can be a little more experimental in terms of not worried about making it too powerful.
Yeah.
They can get away with having, cards like Militia Commander where the stats are actually pretty decent because, you don't have the risk of, those random ODKs. Because that's, I mean, they've said it quite a few times and it's been a reason for quite a few nerfs that they don't like Charge because of the potential for uninteractive combos, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think Militia Commander is pretty cool. Rush is pretty cool, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do with it on the other mechanics. But I think this is a card. Warrior obviously needs a lot of help right now, and this is a card that I feel at this point would slot into almost every Warrior deck. But that's also kind of saying Warrior doesn't have very good cards right now, or at least not enough. So that's kind of a reason Militia Commander I think would slot into most Warrior decks right now.
Yeah. So I mean that's definitely I think of all the new cards, that's obviously I think the one that probably is
most likely to see
play,
right, at this point. Obviously, we can't really make any speculation like that because it is so super early in the release cycle. And then finally, we have another card. We have Pumpkin Peasant. Now, this card doesn't have a strictly new mechanic written on it, but it is essentially a new way for cards to work. And Pumpkin Peasant is a 3-mana 2/4. Another one. This one has lifesteal though, and it also reads each turn. This is in your hand. Swap its attack and health. So the other interesting point is that it does also change its art. And that's not in the text, but it is an important thing to note. It basically is transforming from the human form to the Worgen form. So the idea is, it's at like transforming at night, but the night is between your two turns. So the analogy kind of breaks down there. But it
Yeah,
also reminds me of like Magic the Gathering's transform on like the werewolf minions.
yeah.
It's essentially the same thing, where the card kind of flips and then the stats change and stuff. But in this case, it's a much more direct, just flipping of the attack and health.
And
So
it happens each turn.
yeah, and it happens each turn.
Oh, like I get the concept and like the idea, but I really can't say I like it because this just makes your turn so like. I mean, I suppose it could add an extra level of depth in terms of working out. Okay, when am I gonna play it? Because I mean, so this particular minion, if we look at it,
Yeah.
most of the times, I think you most likely gonna want the 2/4 side of that minion.
Yeah, certainly on curve. The 3-2 is much. Sorry, the 2-4 is much better than the 4-2 simply because of like the fact we talked about earlier with the Magma Rager of having the low health means that the other minions can trade up into it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big issue when you're playing on curve. Less of an issue when you're playing later in the game and there might not be, cheaper minions to trade up into it. So earlier in the game you probably want it as a 2-4 most of the time and later in the game as
Yeah.
a 3-4. But if
I
you
mean,
draw
4/2, you
this on
mean?
turn, yeah, as a 4-2, sorry. If you draw this on turn 2, then you don't really have a choice. It's going to be a
Y-
4-2 on turn 3.
Yeah,
So then you have to
which
make
I'm
the
saying it
decision
makes
of
it quite
do you
awkward,
play it,
right?
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless they print some crazy good cards of it, like crazy good cards of this effect, with like some amazing battle cry or something, I'm not sold on it. But I mean, we'll see. It's early days, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the effect seems cool, but the more and more you think about it, it's like, okay, so at best, like, you don't want a big disparity between the attack and health, right? Otherwise, it's almost always going to be bad when it's on the higher health side. Sorry, the bad when it's on the low health side because of like making the card easier to remove.
Yeah.
Because a lot of removal effects in Hearthstone are damage based, so that's like a big issue. Um, so what that means is it's only really good when the attack and health are close in kind of stat line. If this was like a 3 mana 3/4 without the life steal, then that would be good. And then sometimes it's a 4/3, but even then the 4/3 is most of the time worse on curve. And I do like the fact that it might add extra depth, and if there's some good cards that have this effect, they're good for other reasons than this effect, because I don't
Yeah.
think this effect makes cards good. I think it would have to be a card that is good that has this effect. That's how I kind of
Yeah.
see it. That could, that's the way this effect is kind of gonna see play in competitive Hearthstone at least.
Yep.
So yeah, ultimately I think the effect does add some depth, but is probably not good at least for now. So I mean, what are your thoughts overall on the mechanics and that we see? Are you do the mechanics in that make you more excited for the expansion, less excited? I mean, there's still a lot for them to reveal at this point, I imagine. But does a mechanic like Echo get your blood rushing?
Echo, I will be honest. I mean, Echo does make me like potentially, that extra value.
Hmm. And I think like for me, it's the idea of what else can they put Echo on, and what will they put Echo on? If it's something like spells, that's when it gets really interesting. If it's card that have more interesting effects than just putting minions on the board, and if it's cards that have less than 3 cost, I think that's when we really get it interesting, right?
Yeah, because then you
Because
can
3 it
cost more than
limits you
three
to
copies.
3 basically,
Yeah.
and that limits the flexibility of it. And
If you
yeah,
have 1 or 2 cost ones, then we could be talking.
yeah. I mean, imagine a spell that's like 2 mana deal 2 damage, right? That's quite
Yeah.
cool. It isn't OP at any point. If you're paying, if it's a mage spell, let's say, uh, if you're paying 2 mana for 2 damage, that's not necessarily good. And if you go up 4, that's worse than Fireball. Uh, 6 still worse than Fireball. 8 is a breakpoint we don't usually see. 8 mana, 8 damage. And then obviously at 10, it's basically just Pyroblast. The
Yeah.
difference
So okay.
being its interaction with something like Mana Worm or um,
Well,
Sorcerer's
yeah.
Apprentice or those kind of things.
Oh, I'm scared. I'm scared they print a card like that now. The more you mention it,
Well,
the
two
more
Sorcerer's
scared.
Apprentice. It would no. That is a they would never print that card. That's just two Sorcerer's Apprentices. It's a turn four OTK.
Yeah, they're never gonna do that. Yeah, never.
I was just using it as an example, right? But yeah,
Yeah,
that's definitely not a card.
that's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, Rush then. Well, thoughts on like uh once
Uh,
again, do you think these mechanics do you think these mechanics indicate good things for the set at least, rather than the mechanics themselves? um they seem a bit odd in terms of their theme at least, except
yeah,
swapping
I mean, we'll have to see if there's any like sort of any other cycles or any sort of something coherent because at the moment each of these cards are all very on their own in a way, right? Like none of them link to each other. They don't have any sort of like. So obviously, they're just six random cards.
yeah.
But I mean, we'll have to see. I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like thematically they don't really necessarily make sense, but obviously I imagine, in terms of like art and stuff, they at least make sense. But I'm really not sure exactly what I'm expecting for the Witchwood, except lots of spells.
Well, lots of worgans and witches
Yeah,
and like scarecrows. Maybe maybe like
scarecrows. That,
well,
I mean, that's
scarecrow.
mobs. But
Yeah,
anyway,
but still kind of a scary vibe, right? Like the witch.
yeah, Halloweeny kind of theme.
Yeah.
Okay, and we are going to have some new card backs as well. The one on your left here, is going to be the one that's available with the pre-order that most looks like the kind of preview art we saw for uh, the expansions. When the three expansions of the year that we talked about.
Oh,
The
yes.
second one is the reward for Monster Hunt, um, which is a new game mode in a way that we're going to be able to talk about. It is basically like Dungeon Run in that you build your deck as you go. You're playing different bosses, but the difference with Monster Hunt is that you're not playing as a paladin, a mage, a shaman. You're playing as one of four specific characters. I don't want to say heroes. You can play as the Cannoneer, the Houndmaster, Time Tinkerer, and Tracker heroes. Honestly, what this reminds me of is like board games. Like now, I just feel like Dungeon Run's a board game, right? Like you get these four specific heroes and you like have to do this like rogue-like kind of thing with them, and that could be quite cool. It's gonna be interesting to see if
Yeah.
they make like new cards just for these heroes. Like, are they gonna have their own class cards? Maybe they're gonna borrow from Hearthstone classes or
I
combinations of
always
Hearthstone
like these
classes.
PVE. I mean, like I always like these. This sort of unique PVE content we saw with like dungeon runs. They said it's gonna be very similar, and I think I mean, by all it looks like it's gonna be free, which is
Yeah,
obviously quite nice as well.
yeah, and it rewards the card back,
Yeah,
instead
I
of like
mean,
Arthas, which
people
is
obviously gonna be a bit upset that it doesn't actually give
uh,
you card packs. I think it might,
yeah,
but I
it
don't think
looks. I'm
so.
guessing it probably won't because for the large part, I imagine they're using pretty much the engine for the dungeon run, and I don't think that kind of rewards are built into it. Um, but on the topic of card packs, apparently we are going to be getting a more card pack quests when the expansion goes live, and it seems like there will be. They've kind of said there will be more of them. In terms
And
of
like
like how
login
many.
rewards as well. I think
Yeah,
where you're gonna get
and login
you're gonna
rewards.
get when you log in for the first time, you're gonna get three free packs, and then you get the and a free class legendary. So it looks like
Yeah,
that's kind of becoming a sort of a
a
regular
standard.
thing,
Even though
a
this
standard
time
thing now almost.
they don't
Yeah,
have that kind of cycle necessarily. I mean, they might still, for all we know.
yeah.
But from what we know at this point, they don't have that cycle of class legendaries.
But yeah, so I'm really excited. Change is always good. I mean, I think everybody sort of is over like the current meta in like its form in terms of
Well, I mean,
people are looking forward to cards rotating.
yeah, I think in tournaments it's still pretty interesting, but we
Yeah.
will get to that in a sec when we get to our esports segment. But yeah, I mean, what I like at least about Monster Hunt the most is the idea of playing as a new character.
Yeah.
Uh, Especially if there's like new class cards for this character, I think that could be really cool.
Or
Uh,
special conditions as well. Like I always
yeah,
have fun with those, where like your hero powers are different, or there's some weird modifier, like we had with the Lich King, or where
yeah.
you have it's like a puzzle. I enjoy it because it's almost like a puzzle in a way, right?
Yeah, and I mean, what's cool about that is like it differs a lot from the standard game, right? Like
Mm.
even with Dungeon Run, it's different because your opponents are so different with the bosses and whatnot. But the cards you're playing are still cards that are familiar to you, bar the treasures and that. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so like yeah, and you can get them in very weird combinations where you can have more than one copy of a legendary a lot of the time, based on your loot and whatnot. But overall, they're mostly still normal Hearthstone cards, and it'll be interesting to see if they break from that and introduce a lot of like new specific cards for this mode.
yeah. So I mean, I can't wait. Really starting to count down to middle of April.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically a month away.
Yeah, I
So
mean, the first thing
hype.
we need is to actually get some more card announcements. So I think that'll
Yeah,
be the 26th of March that they uh,
they'll probably have the stream. They'll
yeah.
do the usual
Yeah.
like live stream.
Yeah, so I mean, what they announced specifically around the card packs is that apparently there'll be 20 card packs in total that you'll be getting free.
They didn't
So,
announce. I think it was data mined.
uh,
Uh,
oh, data mining. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
true.
I think it was
Uh,
the guys at like Hearthstone and some of those others like Reddit and things. I think they might data mined the patch, and they found that basically, so like there's 20 free pack. There's a total amount of 20 free packs that are going to be given out, and I think people suspect it might just be like completing your dailies within the first few weeks of the expansion, like you know, to celebrate the new year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it does seem to be something related to that because apparently some of them will be Kobolds packs. So apparently days 3, 7, 10, and 16 are Witchwood card packs, and the rest are Kobolds pack, Kobolds and Catacombs packs. So they
Yeah.
are related to the year as a whole, not only the Witchwood packs. So yeah, I mean that is another important thing that kind of got at least data mined from the patch notes. So there are going to be a lot more free packs on top of the extra packs you get, for the pre-purchasing um, the pre-purchase. Do you think that's going to be the standard going forward? Do you think they can ever go back on 70 packs on the
Oh
pre-purchase now?
yeah,
Right? They they,
that's
they
that's
can't
always
surely. I mean, they
that's
took
always the
away our
thing, right?
card back once,
Oh,
and then
and people
they
got
brought it
upset
back.
about yeah.
Uh,
So I mean, I wonder now, like Blizzard have gone okay. So I'm curious because last time they introduced this where you got like they started this with the 50 packs for $40. Then they increased the prices shortly afterwards. I don't know if you remember. And then people were like, "Ha, you gave us 10 free packs, but you increased the prices, so you didn't really actually give us anything."
yeah.
So I mean, if this is the standard and the price stays the same, I think it's actually quite good. At the end of the day, I don't think Blizzard are losing anything by doing it. At the end of the day, I mean, just remember they are giving digital goods.
Yep.
So
But they, I
by
mean,
them
they're
giving,
losing out on potential sales. It's not just that simple as they're
yeah,
giving digital goods, because there's a point at which people don't feel the need to buy anymore.
yeah, and
So
obviously they want to try find because they want to keep enough people still playing the game, so they buy. But they also, it's about the balance.
yeah, they don't want to make people feel like the
They don't have
game
to
is
spend
too
money anymore.
expensive, which has been a complaint
But they also don't want it to
for
reach a
a
point
lot of
where,
people.
oh, I get too much free stuff, so I don't have to spend any money,
Yeah.
because they want to make money still, remember?
Yep. They definitely want to make money still. Okay, so moving on. The next important thing, we were talking about maybe the meta getting stale. Well, the meta wasn't stale at HCT Toronto this last weekend. I mean, the decks we saw from the top eight there in particular were very interesting, and it was Odemian that walked away with the victory there, beating Hunter Ace in the final. Notably, that is Hunter Ace's second finals that he's made already in HCT events this season, or this
Yeah,
year, sorry, and
yeah,
this season as well. So I mean, that's a really good start for the young Norwegian kid. I mean, he's what 17.
yeah.
So a
It's very,
really
yeah,
really good start for him, and I mean he kind of rose to prominence on ladder at least, playing a lot of Raza Priest and doing really well with that, but he's excelled since the deck has been nerfed as well. So, showing that he's not just a Raza Priest player, like some players that tend to be heavy proponents of a single deck. And one of those was on show this weekend as well. One of your heroes, I imagine,
What?
Fibonacci,
Oh yes.
um, and
I
his
st-
Control Warrior.
Control. There's actually quite a lot of control warriors,
Yeah,
surprisingly.
and that's the big surprise from this. I mean, if we look at the top eight breakdown here, we actually have three fatigue warriors in the top eight. Not something most people would have anticipated going into it. I mean, you look at the split here of classes, and there's no class with more than, well, no deck, sorry, with more than three people in the top eight having that single deck, except for Dragon Priest, which is the combo priest, basically. That was in seven of the top eight lineups. So that definitely seems like the number one deck right now. Obviously, the Warlocks were kind of split between Cube Warlock and Control. So it was a 3-3 even split there, with two people playing Zoo as well. So Warlock was in every lineup, but just a split of to what decks. And
Yeah.
I mean, one of the big things was the aggro paladins, or aggro being the Murloc paladins and the Doodadins, not necessarily performing that well in what seemed like a meta that was kind of somewhat targeted to counter them. I mean, even two players bringing Jade Druid, another class or another deck that's not been very popular on ladder in particular. But Jade Druid can do quite well against something like Doodadin with cards like Swipe and Spreading Plague.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then of course we also had Hunter, two Hunters. So I mean, it, pretty much every class except Rogue was represented in this top eight. So maybe it's not
Is there
actually.
is there a shaman there?
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry, no Shaman, no Shaman, no Rogue.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise, I mean, a big surprise, at least in terms of the Warrior, and it's going to be interesting to see HCT Bangkok, which is coming up this weekend. That is also going to be a similar format. So with this event, it wasn't like a lot of the ones previously where you'd had 16 qualifiers. This was a big open event. So that means, with 256 players, a lot of the top players from across the world flying to the event, which is also what makes Hunter Ace's result here even more
Yeah.
impressive,
I mean,
right? We're talking about him a lot, and he just came second, but I mean, he qualified for one of the um, for the HCT Germany, one of the very first one, and he came second in that, and now he's come second in this, the big open tournament. So he showed he can do it in both the kind of you know tournament formats, let's say. Obviously, to qualify for the top 16 one, you do have to go through large open player format brackets as well. But this one was more of like a DreamHack style, Swiss, and then a cut to top eight.
yeah. And it's just interesting to know that even though it was in Toronto, there are only two Canadian players in the top eight.
Yeah, it shows you how
Uh,
many players traveled for the event.
and of the eight, five of them are from Europe.
Yeah,
Which, I mean, it's just, yeah, it shows diversity and how many people traveled to play in it. I mean, what, there's two French, a German, a Spanish, a Norwegian.
yeah. I mean, the French community, in particular, that traveled had a really great event. I mean, some of the others were doing pretty well up until the end as well. Just a few of them narrowly missing out on top eight as well. Um, a lot of the games I saw in the later rounds were just like two French players versus each other, which is
Uh,
it's kind of a bit of a breakout for the French community as a whole. Let's say, they haven't necessarily had the biggest performances in a lot of the HCT events previously, but they are a very strong community that's very passionate about Hearthstone. So
mm,
it's good to see them, you know, having a good run at these tournaments, and it's gonna be interesting to see how it goes at HCT Bangkok this coming weekend, which is going to be a similar, big open format. But that is all we have for this episode. Hopefully, we'll have some more Witchwood news sooner than the reveals start. Maybe they'll have some other kind of news for us. I doubt it, though. It's probably going to be a bit of a quiet time until we actually get the expansion. So until then, we're just going to have to speculate and keep you up to date with any other news that does happen. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube to keep up to date with everything that's happening. Follow on Twitch, and if you want to contact us to give us any feedback, you can leave comments on the YouTube um, video. That obviously helps a lot, and it's a great place for us to see them and answer them. As well, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Pandemonia at PandemoniaZA to ask him any questions. You can find myself at dib_gaming to ask us any questions. maybe when the new cards come out, you want our immediate opinions. I know for a lot of the previous sets, I've pretty much just been tweeting every card as I see it get revealed. So I might well do that once the card reveals start as well, with a brief 288 characters now summary on what I at least think of the card. So from my first impression, so that's a good way to keep up with what we're doing and also keep up with the streams. I mean, we do often stream as well, usually on my channel, and often Pandemonia and I have been co-oping, mostly to get him to legend this season, but also playing a bit of like high legend on my account. So make sure you check us out there and give us any feedback. It's greatly appreciated. And also, um, you know, keep sharing the video with or the podcast with any friends of yours, and help us grow like that. So from myself and from Pandemonia, I'm sure as well. Thanks a lot for joining us. Cheerio.
Cheers. Cheers.